Yeah, this is part of the cowboy environment that I was looking for, more like a spaghetti western. You see the colors got all muted. And I also knew that I had two scenes in the episode that were actually in bars. One was in Coruscant and one was on Florum. And they ran back against each other. So one had to be very colorful, almost like an urban environment, and this one became very desaturated. So the color also dictated the mood and the scene. It would tell you the difference between locations. It's kind of like when you're with the Empire, everything's usually black and gray and white and red accented. And when you're with the Rebels, there's a whole bunch of colors coming into play, which kind of plays into their disheveled. And all those things are very intentional that Ralph McQuarrie, George, and Joe Johnston were planning in the production of the films, and we brought all that sensibility to this show as well.
Just like what Dave was saying about trying to feel the environments, I love making the environments, the sets on the Clone Wars, actually be a character in the episode. And when we knew we had to do level the whole deep underground, the underworld here, I really wanted it to feel completely different. And obviously I have my influences of, you know, Blade Runner or any movie that's underground where there's no light. So really played heavily on that kind of dirty feeling, that kind of, that always debris rolling around, always graffiti or dust. I really wanted the atmosphere to look thick.
So a big difference is that I told Joel I wanted garbage in the underworld. You know, I wanted to, you go downtown in a big city, you know, let's face it, there's a lot of garbage blowing around, wrappers and whatnot. And in season one, a lot of the environments are very stoic. You see when the wall hits the ground, and it makes it feel very clean no matter how we try to paint it up. So just adding things blowing through the foreground, adding a lot of atmospheric, a lot of dust, a lot of pollen. We added insects later in season 3 flying around. All that stuff is all this information that you're watching, that you process every day that you don't really realize you are. When it's missing, that's when you notice it. And that's why some animation feels very empty. And we've been trying to get the images richer and fuller as we go in the series.
Yeah, and that's, you know, when the show first started, when it first came on, I kind of came on towards the end of season 1, and getting into season 2 started to realize like the importance of having the set connect with the characters, and to have it, you know, I did as much as the show looked cool in the very beginning, it did look like characters walking on cardboard the entire time. So to just starting to add that richness has allowed like Dave and Killian to just know what the limits are as far as where they can push to make the episodes richer, and that kind of brings us like right into season 3.
Season 3. Here we go. So, one thing that we could not do, absolutely not do, no way, Toad George is not going to happen, is water. Water is very hard for us. Not just because it is very hard, period, but because we have a style on our show. So we can't just take a computer canned water effect and put it in the show. If you look closely in season 1, when we pour liquids in the show, that's like a standard simulation that was done. And I think it jumps right out at you. You go, that's a simulation of water. It looks fake. So now that I have Joel, and among many things that you work on The Perfect Storm.
Perfect Storm.
There was a lot of water in that, I noticed. So I thought water would be good. And George thought water would be great and said, let's go to Camino. We can't really get a planet with more water than that. But when George finds out we think we can't do something, it usually inspires him to ask us to do directly just that. So we ended up on a water planet, and at the commissary at Skywalker Ranch, there's this painting, I think it's by N.C. Wyeth, of a canoe going through the rapids. And Joel and I would go down and look at this painting, and I would say, this is how we have to think about water. We have to think about water how a painter would render it somehow. Not how we would simulate it, not what the properties of it are, because the humans in the Clone Wars are exaggerated, they're stylized. The environment's not so much. But water, because of its physical property and that it moves, it had to somehow live more with the moving characters. And that was an important thing.
Yeah, and along with, you know, going to Camino, everyone remembers Camino from, you know, the Attack of the Clones, where it was always storming, and I think that was easy. And having worked on Perfect Storm, you know, we got really good at doing storm water. And so that's why it just, well, what are we going to do with Camino? Use the storm water.
Yeah.
You know, really good to use the calm water. And so knowing we're going to Camino, we didn't really have to have the stormwater, so we developed a way to adapt to our painterly style, and it's kind of like how you'll see fire, the look of fire evolve over the show, because that's really a challenge. Having, like Dave said, when we worked at ILM, it's like everything must be photoreal, and it was a real learning curve to actually bend the knowledge of photoreal into being something that's drawn or look like it's you stop it on film, looks like it's painted. So I had to do the same thing with water. So keep an eye on fire and keep an eye on water on this.
What I think is clever about that is that in terms of the CG solutions that you're able to figure out for your show, for Clone Wars, it's so different than what you normally hear marched about CG animation, because you guys have so many constraints on you, right? When there's a CG animated film or special effects film comes out, you'll hear stories about, oh, it had so many million polygons, the creature had so many million pieces of hair on it, and you guys, with the constraints that you have to figure it out. You have to innovate, which I think is
an example. And I watched Wall-E with Andy Stanton up at the ranch, and I told him I think there were more assets, which is anything built for the movie, in Wall-E's little shack than there were in the entire season 1 of Clone Wars. I mean, that's how dense a feature film is compared to a television show. But we have had, and we've tasked ourselves with making it not seem like that's the case. And I think that's the leap you start to see in season 2 and season 3. Another big step, what I'll point out, what you're looking at here, these are actual concept drawings that were done for Attack of the Clones. As soon as we're going to go to an environment that we know from one of the films, we start digging through the archives and start pulling things out. Not just what you guys have seen, but a lot of hallways and areas of this place that you haven't seen, because now we're going to go there in great detail. Where do all these clones sleep? What's their basic training like? What kind of armor do they wear when they're training? These were all questions that George had and that we had to answer. And we went into his archive and sat there and went through all these drawings with him. We started picking things out. The next drawing is, this is actually from the Clone Wars now, as we've hybrided. This is what the barracks would look like or will look like, in season 3 of the Clone Wars. So you can talk a little about that design. It's very 2001 also.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was cool because we knew that we were going to see parts of Camino that weren't in any of the movies at all. So we got to pull stuff from the archives, and then we got to sort of put a spin on it too. And this particular design was done by Pat Presley, who was actually somewhere in the room as I saw him come in. Yeah, we'll do this all the time, where we'll get designs and sort of finesse them or rework them slightly so that they work for what the story and the actual episode calls for. So there's a lot of really sort of interesting, fun scenes and very different types of scenes that actually take place in the set, or will take place in the set. Yeah.
Like there might be reflections on the floor.
This is a medical room. This is kind of special for you guys to see because I had to cut this scene from the episode in the medical room. But that's another good reason. Once you get the DVD nowadays, you're going to get a lot of information that got cut from the series, because we can only put 22 minutes on the air, and the most recent episode I directed came in at 29 minutes. So yeah, that's 7 minutes of footage we had to find a way to cut and still tell the story that we wanted to tell. So the medical room here ended up on the cutting room floor, but I think some of it actually made it all the way to render, and you'll see it only in the opening montage of the announcer with Tom Kane talking about the Clone War. That's where it will appear. Here's a loading dock where the troopers come in and out. Sometimes giant Jedi cruisers pull up alongside this, and they all march right up on the gangway to enter the Clone War. Another interior hangar. Just, we have to think like we're building a movie set, as if we have a backlot or a sound stage, and this is our kind of area to shoot in. We're thinking of lighting. That was a very difficult, it's a massive scale for us to do in the series right there.